So first I'd like to just note from the irony department, we're going to talk about net generation, but we've got a bunch of baby boomers and Generation X folks up here on the panel. They're going to talk about it, but so Sean, some people, some of us geezers get it. Yesterday you met Sean Voltman, who's the Generation Y or Millennial analyst. And I'm the Generation X analyst, but I'm a heretic among my colleagues who look at Intellipedia and blogs and A-Space, and they don't get it, and they certainly don't want to. They don't really see the value in it.
With that, I'd like to start by introducing Sean Dennehy. Sean's got 15 years of experience in the intelligence community in multiple organizations and is currently the chief of CI's Intellipedia development. Very well known for the briefings and the engagement he's done with the community on Intellipedia. So it's an honor to have him on our panel today. Sean?
Like Teresa and Sean, I've been pretty frustrated with the way that IT has been deployed in the intelligence community. Most of the tools until recently are geared towards the individual knowledge worker. Almost all the tools do not work with one another. You can't mash up these tools. Even the developers have a name for the tools, and General Clapper referred to it earlier today. A shoebox. Think about that for a second, a shoebox. When I think of a shoebox, I think of four walls with a lid on top. It doesn't necessarily scream collaboration and openness, does it? And then I've also interacted with some of the knowledge management people across the community, and they often say, well, if we could only get people to get that information out of their shoebox. And my answer is, well, why not have them not put it in the shoebox to begin with? Don Burke from the CIA's DS and TNI, as well as a small group of lead users across the intelligence community, have been encouraging IC officers to get that information out of those shoeboxes and move them onto platforms such as Intellipedia, the IntelliLink blogs, Tag Connect, and many of the other tools that have been deployed by intelligence community enterprise services, which is an invaluable part of the community.
Don Burke, Intellipedia doyen. It's just simply a software platform that allows you to create a page that anyone else can contribute to that page. There are a bunch of other sort of ancillary things underneath that, probably the most important of which is that every edit is tracked so that you can see every version of that edit. You can literally go back to the first edit on Wikipedia in 2001 and see what it was. You can literally see the very first edit on the 9/11 attacks. Mm-hmm. And you can watch every iteration of that go through. A second critical thing about a wiki is that parallel to that wiki page is what's called a discussion page. And that discussion page is where you debate what should be on the main page, right? Is it factual? Is it not factual? Should we include this? Should we split the article apart? Is this biased? Is this neutral? Is this, what other sources can we bring to bear? On and on and on and on. And arguably, on Wikipedia, the most valuable resource is the page that no one ever goes to, which is the discussion page. Because that is where you're like, it is the never-ending scientific method at work, right? Just put something on paper and then debate it and try to find yourself closer to the truth. Find yourself closer to what real is. And that's all happening on the discussion page.
Louis Shepard, Chief of Requirements and Research at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Okay, here's another one you may have heard of, Intellipedia. The origin stories of Intellipedia have been bastardized over and over. And I want to give a little credit, and I can't do it fully by name, to the actual father of Intellipedia. So there are, the story, and you may have heard this in a variety of ways, so it's kind of a mosaic, and this may be the parable of the elephant, the blind man and the elephant. But I'll tell you what happened within DIA. In 2004, several things happened that were beginning to alter our mindset. Number one, Calvin and the Galileo Awards. The Galileo Awards start. Calvin is one of the first winners, or maybe the first winner, with the idea of why don't we have web tools and like Wikipedia for intelligence. We all read it. We all read what he wrote. We all agreed with it wholeheartedly. And at DIA, we started, hey, now we've got license. Other people are thinking this way. This is great. So at one of our meetings, I mentioned that we used to have a weekly meeting at Merrifield. It was a management meeting. We called it the BRB, the Business Review Board. And I changed that meeting quite substantially so that it became different. It included demos and open discussion of new challenges and so forth. And one of them, we talked about this topic. And afterwards, a guy came to see me. Open door policy. Guy named Mike. And Mike was a very reserved, kind of quiet, solid professional. And I checked again last night, he's never openly acknowledged his work in intelligence. He's got an employer that he was a contractor for then and now. And so I don't want to, out him that way. I did subsequently, of course, tell his boss, and he got rewarded within his outfit, and everybody knew, and so that was great. But Mike came to me and said, Wikipedia is Wikimedia software and MediaWiki. And we run JWix. It's open source. I could turn that on JWix in an hour. I said, approved. Now, we did not turn it on JWix in an hour, but we certainly did pretty damn quickly. So in 2004, we did the first version of Intellipedia. They came up with the name Intellipedia, Mike and a couple of other people. And my contribution, this shows you how dumb I am. My contribution was, hey, and they'd done a funky little logo for it. Like, I don't know, late 2004 or something. Mid 2000, I think second half of 2004. And we weren't, cataloging dates of did this created Intellipedia Day. My contribution was, I said, hey, why don't you, this a relic of its time, let's capitalize the P. So, Intellipedia. Look cool in web, it's what the kids out in California are doing, that kind of stuff. Funky spellings and names. So, Intellipedia launched for internal use first in DS. We were prototyping it and testing it and so forth. And then we had multiple DI offices using it. And that engendered two interesting things. One positive and one negative side of how to deal with bureaucracies and organizational management. The first was salutary, I think. I think, in my estimation. I thought, the whole premise of Wikipedia, and therefore Intellipedia, to be valuable, is we need way more eyeballs on this. this needs to be open not just for us and a couple of who can we strike an official partnership with their management over in DI so that they're allowed to use this Intellipedia thing. Because look, this was MediaWiki software. This was exactly at the beginning. It was exactly we scraped Wikipedia. Sorry, Wikipedia. We scraped a bunch of their content, and the original content of Intellipedia was all Wikipedia content. Not everything, obviously, but a bunch of targeted sites, and then opened for editing, user creation and curation. And that was the whole premise and point of it. And we realized, striking individual agreements with the DI offices is not going to scale. And also the user base. You just want to open this up. And opening it up across DIA or across DOTAS wasn't ambitious enough. It wasn't, we wanted this to live up to intelligence community the way Calvin said. So at the time, we had a few small collaborative efforts with the Intel Management Office. And and they were great. I can't remember, I think John Brantley was the director of IMO. He had come in at some point. He wasn't the director when I first started. It was kind of the old guys. Steve Shancher was still around, I think, and a few others. Leon Bloom was the head of search for IMO. Leon Bloom, unheralded genius who did get Google into the intelligence community. I remember us talking about that. And I said to IMO, we want to turn this over to you. We're running it on DIA servers. We'll continue to do that if you like, but this needs to be an IMO intelligence-wide, IC-wide project. That's what it should be. And so they love that idea, especially since we offered support for a specific period of time. And so Intellipedia, essentially we donated it we said, okay, DIA built this, but go ahead, take it, use it. That's it. You don't even have to give us credit. You're welcome.
Don Burke again.
When was Intellipedia moved into the IntelLink ecosystem? When did that happen?
Well, that was from the get-go.
From the go.
That was a strategic decision that Sean made right out of the gate that probably one could argue was in the top 3 reasons why it succeeded, why it had any chance.
And what was IntelLink?
IntelLink is the shop that manages all of the sort of common architecture of the fabric, the internet fabric between all of the agencies.
And it's run by the Director of National Intelligence?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore, okay. But at the time it was.
Well, for a while it was. Yeah, it's back where it was. And again, I don't know what's public and not. So the DNI took it over.
Yeah, it was called the Intelligence Community Enterprise Services Office. Yeah. And they had several different things they had, but they also had the IntelLink suite. Yeah. So Intellipedia was part of that suite.
Yeah, but then the DNI realized they didn't really want to be in operations because that costs a lot of money and a lot of people, so they shoved it back. We have to remember, this is the dawn of the iPhone era.
Right.
Right. This was, when I was doing all that analytic work, it was the BlackBerry era.
Right.
Right? There was no social media. There was no anything. And then, but there was this thing called Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. And Wikipedia had gotten started in the summer of 2001.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Ironically enough.
Apropos.
The summer of 2001. So by the time I was doing this analytic surveying for the Directorate of Science and Technology, I started learning about these wiki things. I can't remember exactly which, the chicken and egg, I can't remember exactly which came first. But eventually Stephanie, I was briefing Stephanie one day, and she just turned to me and said something to the effect of, well, how do we keep from losing all our knowledge? Like, we're digitizing everything, but, you know, people used to have stuff in paper, but now it's not in paper, and when they leave, and she's like, I worry that, like, if I wanted to ask a question, like, what do we know about X, Y, or Z, that we really wouldn't be able to find that information anymore. And I said, yeah, that's an interesting problem. There are these things called wikis. How about just letting me have a go at those? Because I had been learning about them. We had one in the S&T that was just internal, and I had run across Sean, who was doing it for the DI at the time. And
who's Sean? Sean
Dennehy, the father, really, of Intellipedia. Okay. And so I started, so she said, sure. So she took me offline. She just kind of put me in a made-up world and said, go see what you can do. And so I began to partner with Sean, and we became this dynamic duo, and just started talking about Intellipedia and telling people about it and showing them and helping them think about how they could use it. And we started developing the operating models for Intellipedia, and like, how does it work, and what are our guiding principles, and how do we moderate it, and how do we do just on and on and on and on.
Carmen Medina, Deputy Director for Analysis.
When did you become aware of Sean Dennehy's efforts on Intellipedia? Or what wasn't called Intellipedia at the time?
It was called Iraqipedia.
Yeah.
I know that.
When did you become aware of that?
Our memories are flawed, but my memory is he comes to see me probably within the first 6 months of 2004. And he says, Carmen, I've got this idea. And he says, we're going to bring the MediaWiki software behind the firewall, and we need to do a lot of coordination across the community on this Iraq thing. So we need to use the MediaWiki software to create a communal, common information space about Iraq, and we're going to call it Iraqipedia. And I said, that is a fantastic idea. Let's do it. My memory is, which can be highly flawed, but my memory is that I said, but we're going to have to do it really quietly to start with, because there are all sorts of agency rules that are on the books that make it difficult, if not illegal, to do this. So, for example, and I knew
illegal with air quotes.
Yeah, with air quotes. And I knew this because I had been by this time I had been working this issue for this kind of issue in one way or another for, let's say, 7 years, since the late 90s. And I knew, for example, that there was some regulation that we could participate in collaboration platforms, but only within the agency. We could not participate in interagency collaboration platforms. I knew that existed. And I remember, this is my memory, I remember saying to Sean, I don't remember exactly when Don enters the picture, but he soon enters the picture. I remember saying to Sean something like, it's a rule, and the thing about bureaucracies is they create so many rules that they forget about them. And they don't actually probably even remember that they've created this rule, but I know because I had run into it before that this rule exists. So our job is to just build it out quietly, do the best we can, and then let me or somebody else figure out how to change the rule. But let's just get going. And their management, as I understand it, was willing to slice out a little bit of money, a little bit of space, a little bit of time. Of the three leaders on the 7th floor at the time, John Kringen, Peter Clement, and I was the one that was super interested in this. I kept John and Peter informed. Peter still loved his newspapers and would spend the first 30 minutes of every day going through by hand all the newspapers. And I used to like to stick in my head at 7:30 in the morning and say, Peter, newspapers are dying. And he hated that. Peter and I are dear friends, dear colleagues from whenever. But I would, tell John what I was doing. I didn't hide this. And John was like, fine. So John knew that we had to deliver change, that we had been appointed as a leadership team to deliver change. So I think generally he thought of me as the idea person for change, and not hearing any other ideas, he was willing to go with mine. Right? Peter, this was just never a priority for him. And so I would tell John, but as I recall, I was sort of Sean and Don's point person in the front office.
Don Burke.
The key person who helped us succeed more than anyone else was Carmen Medina. She gave Sean the top cover. She let him run. She did the same thing that Stephanie did for me. So you could say that Stephanie was also key because she let me run. So we had two senior leaders that gave us the top cover to just go try. Not knowing what kind of shit was going to roll downhill to them, they let us go try. And in Carmen's case, back in those days, the interweb between the community was a static place. There was no dynamic content. And in fact, at CIA, to be able to put something on the space available to the IC, you had to go through approved gatekeepers. And the policy, that was actually written into policy. And so Carmen really helped spearhead the effort to navigate that. Let's just sort of say it that way. That was so architecturally and policy-wise, Intellipedia should have never worked.
Sean Dennehy again.
In addition, while we have brought the same MediaWiki software as Wikipedia into the intelligence community, we are not implementing it in the same way as Wikipedia. Most notably, the one overarching view for Wikipedia is, or approach or policy within Wikipedia is neutral point of view. So if you go to Wikipedia and you try and put in a political viewpoint on Scientology or abortion or George W. Bush, they rip it out, or it will eventually get removed because it needs to be a neutral point of view. We do not enforce a neutral point of view in Intellipedia or with the blogs or other things, because we don't want to boil down to what all we can all agree on. That is homogenized intelligence. What we encourage is attributable point of view, where either individuals or agencies or can do team A, team B analysis on various topics, and capture the disagreements on those topics, because we're the intelligence community. We can't agree on anything, period. If you look at across the community, from the minute you're brought into the community, you're taught that you need to own your issues. So immediately you look at a person, a subject matter expert in another agency, and you try and find where you disagree with that person, and you'll always find some type of disagreement, because that way you own your issue. If you agreed with them 100%, it would kind of be like sharing, and we can't do that. You need to own your issue. So.
Jesse Wilson, intelligence analyst at DIA. Yes, it was a great question. I was so excited when I didn't even know about it. I just stumbled across Intellipedia, and the normal process, right, for intelligence production was every agency had, their flagship products that they produced, and every product should start with analytic design, right? Answering a question, figuring out the what's already been produced on that, knowledge review, developing methodologies to answer gaps, producing, doing the research, producing the analysis, and then evaluating that analysis. But if you think about it, you're by the time you're sending that product out for coordination, and it's basically already done. There's no time to really look at your key assumptions, to question the analytic design or methodology. It's just, do you agree with this, the way this word is crafted, which is important too, right? And certainly that process, the same that you have like with peer review with journals, makes the product better, or it gives other analytic voices the opportunity to calibrate those judgments or to dissent. And so it's a good thing, but you're also way far to the right during that process. And when there are breaking events where you're trying to, there's an attack and you're trying to figure out, okay, who did the attack, how many people are killed, all the basic kind of 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why type information. You see it on Wikipedia all the time when something happens, right? And everyone's just fusing information. And so you've got the news agencies and social media putting out reports, and you've got a collection of analysts with no manager, but able to create an article in real time that often is more up to date and more accurate, or can change as, because the first report's always wrong type thing, but as the new report comes in, it's being changed. And so to be able to have that actually on JWIX, where you could fuse, all sources of information, was really great.
Sean Dennehy again.
And we've been encouraging viral adoption. This hasn't been a top-down forcing people to do it. We want people to actually find value in the tools for what they're doing in their day-to-day work, and transfer or replace those existing processes and move those processes into these tools. And we've had some success, and we are continuing to encourage others to take advantage of them.
My wife is a psychotherapist. In fact, she's seeing patients right now. There's a joke in Cynthia's profession. How many psychotherapists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is none. The light bulb has to really want to change. And so Brian, that's part of the issue.
Now we hear again from Don Burke.
People saying that information about my project can't be in the IC space. Like, you're emailing around all the time anyway. That's in IC space. So there was a never-ending, what should I say? I don't know. There's an example that I want to give, but I don't know if I can say it publicly. So again, another one related to classification issues. That was just kind of a never-ending stupid discussion that just shouldn't have ever had happened, but it was always there, never went away.
Now you will hear comments from a member of the intelligence community who wish to remain anonymous. We have digitally altered this contributor's voice and edited some of their comments to respect their wishes.
I had a really good management that was supportive to see it. But I came to the community with this view just impressed upon me by my professors. My professors would tell me, look, we can have a bugging operation in Saddam Hussein's bedroom. What would that yield? What if it's just gibberish? What if it's just him yelling at his wife? It means nothing. It's super cool, but it might be absolute trash. These economic reports, these things that are out in the open, can be far more valuable than anything that's super, super classified. I just kind of never really fell in love with the secrecy culture. And then I saw the Intellipedia systems, and that's what made sense to me.
Now we hear again from Don Burke.
There's a lot of, hemming and hawing from legal people and records management people and on and on. It just, everyone had some reason to say this could never work.
Right.
Right. It breaks something about their time-honored process, which is really not very honored, but time-bound. And so we'd have to win them all over. So Sean and I would go in and we'd talk to them and we'd try to find a way to, make it work and or at least get to a point where we could agree to disagree or, set up some future process or whatever. And, like there are things on Intellipedia, there are tools on Intellipedia today that don't exist on any other Wikipedia because we were trying to be good citizens and, and react to where people raised valid and reasonable concerns. So we were like, yeah, let's add a tool that does this or that. And so that's really cool to do that. So we weren't out to like say that all these reasons were, or all these excuses people were given were irrelevant or stupid. Many of them were. But often there was a valid underlying concern that we needed to try to make sure we addressed.
There were some people that had an attitude like, how dare you edit my page? Then it was the minority, right? But they were there. They were there. I remember this one guy said, my page, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Ellen, it's not your page. It's the government's. Take it easy. They're just trying to help. And I asked him, did they do any substantive edits at all? He said, no, they were just formatting. I said, then why are you getting upset? If you're the expert, they didn't edit substance. They're just helping you garden us. And that's, some people didn't like that, like the gardeners, the Interlink gardeners, right? The Andrea Bakers, the Steve Manziks, the Amy Sengars, and all those other people that were there doing that all day long, right? So she wasn't an analyst. She was just going in and helping with the categories. But it would light up that a change had been made.
There were teams who did nothing but sit there and watch Intellipedia to find errors and then create journals to send up the chains of command to say, see how dangerous Intellipedia is? Rather than fix it or enhance it or let us know, they were choosing to be antagonists in the system to try to destroy it.
That's interesting. Say more about, like, what are those motivations? Was that...
They just were fervent believers that their factory-based approach to producing content was intrinsically the better approach, and that it was the only way to ensure that no mistakes were ever made, regardless of the fact that the entire reason Intellipedia existed because one of the intelligence community's greatest mistakes ever, which was completely because of gaps in the factory-based model, they couldn't see that. All they saw was, the loss of being a gatekeeper.
Interesting.
That's all they saw. And of course, there's always the, well, those folks don't have access to the super special information. And so therefore they can't ever really know what's going on. There's always another level of super special information, right? Even when you think you have it, someone else has something else. So we got really tired of that argument.
So if somebody put something up, right, and it was deleted because it had inappropriate content, something sexist or racist, for example, so it was probably 3 words long. People expended 20,000 lines of text talking about how inappropriate it was. So just the response to me was just it was so disproportionate. The great thing about a wiki is it can be edited and fixed, and it was fixed quickly. People make mistakes. We're a large enterprise, so what? People are just looking for something to hate, right? Is it a manageable defect? Yes. Can we get better? Yes. I just don't subscribe to that view of perfection.
But then there was Intellipedia.
Here's Dr. Lowenthal again.
Which is going to work like Wikipedia. And I was in a meeting recently where somebody said it didn't work. Everybody just parks a lot of stuff there, but nobody goes back to really look at it. It's just, it didn't do what they thought it would do. Which, it is probably a good idea, but analysts don't work that way. They don't. This, you've been an analyst. That's not how analysts work when they're doing a job. Go back and say, oh, I wonder what's in Intellipedia. I wonder if we have anything on that. So that wasn't successful.
Sean Waltman, Google's global head of cloud geography. Well, which is what Chris fought for years against. Do not create the NGA, Turkey page. No. This is the page about Turkey. Everybody's going to work on it together. Because otherwise you're not going to run into each other and have that opportunity to be like, who is this guy? He knows a lot about that. Oh, or this guy's an idiot. He knows nothing about this, and here's why. But that was the natural inclination, is that everyone would come in and they would build their own branded page for the same topic.
Don Burke again.
If you contribute to a common space where you're synthesizing knowledge that becomes a place that people just go to, they get their nugget of information, that's like viscerally powerful. So even if it is just a smaller number of people who are doing that contribution, the impact of that is much greater. And everyone benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that has always been out there that, well, not everyone contributes, therefore it's irrelevant, I just find completely fallacious and stupid.
Now we hear again from Jesse Wilson.
Where I think it actually got, and it went up the command, and we got some positive feedback, not only in our leadership there at Central Command and at DIA, but even at the D&I level, was we were, at this point I was a permanent employee. I was a WMD analyst, but focused a lot on Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the efforts of like using chlorine augmented vehicle-borne IEDs, and tracking how they were acquiring that, what the effect was, the psychological effect that was having, those types of things, and working a lot with the national laboratories to see whether how you track them with serial numbers or if the wind's blowing, how far will that affect people? Really get an understanding of what this threat was. And so I created a page on that on the JBooks version, and invited folks from the National Counterterrorism Center, Lawrence Livermore, as well as intel agencies to contribute. And what was really cool is we needed to draft a collection requirement, a human collection requirement. And so the old way of doing it would have been to start a Word document and type in some requirements, and then maybe send it out for coordination and get some feedback. But instead we did it right there on the page, and we already had some basic knowledge in there, a timeline of every single attack, pictures. People just started contributing, and people I didn't even know about that had knowledge on this. This, you talk about tap expertise wherever it resides. Well, that takes you having to know where it resides. This created a capability where expertise was finding you, and so it was very powerful. And so we were able to draft the requirement faster, and everyone knew all these different agencies about it, and added value with their perspective of what was important to ask in that requirement, and it was fantastic. And that page ended up being like the page that the ops guys would go to, the planners were going to. Everyone was going to that page, and while we would still do some traditional product updates, whether it was a briefing product for the commander or the staff, if people were just like, hey, where are we at with how many attacks there are, or which plants or these things are being stolen from, or those types of things, we just send them the link. It's right there. It gave us kind of a, as we were working through these issues on, when do you use it, when do you not use it, when you have a corporate, if you will, type product, with the DIA or the CENTCOM seal on it versus, and also, Tom Finger, the D&I for analysis, at the time, he actually heard about this and touted it to Congress, about how we were using these tools. And so I think, actually Mike McConnell actually came to CENTCOM and gave me an award. So it kind of gave me a little bit of, okay, yeah, what this guy's doing is the right thing, so that was helpful. And then we had kind of worked out the wrinkles that we needed to work out on what information can go here, what can't. Can ORCON go on here? Can it not? And so, it was very helpful then as I transitioned from W&D to the Afghanistan mission, to how we were going to do business.
Now we hear again from Don Burke.
Because of that media event and a variety of other sort of endeavors, people began to hear about the fact that there was this thing called Intellipedia in the intelligence community. And they were all fascinated. But at that time, remember, there was a broad movement, right? As this thing emerged, social media emerged into the zeitgeist of our society. There was an entire movement across business and personal to try to grapple with how to put this stuff to use. And there was the quintessential sort of example of that was the Time Person of the Year. And that part, you remember what that one was?
Yes. Yeah.
So I forget what year that was, but maybe 2007? I don't know. 2008? And it had just a mirror on the front. It was tinfoil, of course.
Right,
but
yes.
That's, the person of the year was you. And so they really helped us. I'm still in touch with some of them. They're still kind of friends. And they really helped us kind of understand what others were doing. There was a professor at Harvard, Andrew McAfee, who was very helpful to us, and I think he really enjoyed learning from us as well and what we were doing. There was a Marcia Blackburn, I think, was big in the social learning space. There's just a variety of folks that sort of emerged, and we learned from them. They learned from us. I mean, it was still, even to this day, it seems weird to me that the IC was kind of ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
We became like the guidepost for all these other organizations, even for corporate world. Like, hey, if CIA can do a wiki, we ought to be able to do it at XYZ Corp, or at agency X, Y, or Z, and that just is super cool to think about.
Was the intelligence community the white hot center of Enterprise 2.0?
Absolutely, 100%. There was a stark contrast. Usually the public sector tends to be behind in everything. And I had that view, and I got invited to one of these conferences. And this was, every unbelievable company that you can name were there and around the room. And and not just companies, it was like the government of Canada, Procter & Gamble, Best Buy, Firestone. Who else was there? Nokia. That was just the tip of the iceberg, and everyone went around and demoed their stuff. Procter & Gamble got up there and talked about their Inside Out program. A lot of talent is on the outside. We need to bring that in. Our scientists are awesome, but we need the flattening out view. They went through that and they showed, recipes. I think Lego was there too, right? And they did huge things with co-designing with their customers. Huge things with Again, they have their Lego employees, but they do a lot of these crowdsourcing exercises to create new product. Again, the way that real work gets done by flattening out and not saying that these people are lesser. Or the unwashed masses because they don't work at Lego and they're not like a pro like me. That flat view produces better stuff. Right? All this stuff got me excited. Then it was our turn. We get up and we walk through, and I think this was in the 2008-2009 timeframe. So the Interlink suite had been running for 3 or 4 years. I think we had a more than 100,000 users. The active user rate was unbelievably high. As far as anyway that we passed it at the time, number of contributions per day, and showed the training programs that were at CIA and NGA that taught knowledge management techniques and email reduction campaigns and why this was better, and the performance metrics, and then just the different tools. In addition to the wiki, there was the the social bookmarking capability, and the blogs, all sorts of stuff. There was a Twitter knockoff that came a little bit later. But getting up there, it wasn't even close comparatively. We were way, way, way in the lead as far as how to manage knowledge in a transparent way. It wasn't even close. I remember one comment from a guy representing a very large manufacturer, and it has always stuck with me. This guy said, hey, you were talking about underperforming employees and putting things into people's performance plans to contribute to this. And he said, let me tell you, I think that you have a very rosy view of the private sector. We have turkey farms, meaning low-performing employees that go to certain divisions. We don't fire people because they're not doing a good job, and it's Friday. Then he said, we have very similar information sharing and performance management issues because we are a gigantic enterprise like you. And to be frank, you're outperforming us in certain categories. And that was just something I will always remember. That conference and that feedback still to this day makes me doubt that the private sector is always better and ahead.
The best and worst thing that ever happened to Intellipedia is that we had no budget.
Here's Don again.
How do you kill something that doesn't have a budget? It has no head. Sean and I loved at the time to talk about the book, The Starfish and the Spider.
Rod
Beckstrom. Because we were the starfish. How do you kill a starfish?
Well, most people chop an arm off or try to cut it in half, which just causes more starfish.
Right, and it just grows another.
Right.
Right, because there is no central head.
Right.
And that was our greatest strength, was that there was no single head. It was our greatest weakness, too. But as you said, it still exists.
Right.
We didn't worry about brands. We didn't try to plop CIA logos all over it. We didn't, and we had this really starfishy structure where you never really knew where you would have to go to stop it. So that's how we survived in those early years.
So it's a little bit like an insurgency.
Not a little bit. I mean, it was an insurgency.
It was an insurgency.
Yeah, it was a good insurgency. It was an insurgency intended in every shape and form to improve the community. But it was an insurgency against the bureaucracy, no doubt about it.
Michael Wertheimer, Assistant Deputy Director and Chief Technology Officer for Analysis at the Office of the DNI. People like Don Burke, who was just an extraordinary hero, in my view. Trying to create Intellipedia, trying to create other mechanisms by which we could share, looking at the best of what the emerging internet had, and can we bring that in and be even smarter about it? They came to Andy and they came to me, and they said, can you help us with this? And I can't help with programmatics. I mean, I'm not going to tell CIA to invest or not invest. But two things happened that maybe was helpful to them. First was Tom Finger we explained it to him, and he was behind it. And the head of analysis for the whole community matters. I don't think that was a fight that CIA wanted to really have with Tom. There were fights they wanted to fight, but that wasn't it. And they controlled it. So, when you are the executive agent for something that you might be a little afraid of, you own it. You're not as frightened by it. You don't. So we got Tom on board, and Tom was on board because he trusted me and he trusted Andy. He needed two of us. He really did. So that helped. The second thing that I think helped in a small way was we made it part of analytic transformation. So when analytic transformation was discussed, it was part of our, we had a charter to do transformation. And they got to be a part of that. And I think Don and others at least have said to me, having an ally in the ODNI gave them enough of the actual top cover, maybe the marginal 10%, that CIA said, go forth and do your thing. And they did it, and we supported them, not with money or anything, but with overhead, intellectual overhead, and made sure that they could do the things they were trying to do. And we briefed it wherever we went. I think that was a big deal, and I was genuinely pleased the extent to which they succeeded at that, and they were recognized for it at CIA.
So DNI kind of took an active interest in, at least shepherding us along and giving us some air cover and helping out here and there. I'm not going to go into all the sort of ins and outs because I don't know what's public and not public necessarily. So, but it was, for us at least, it was a really key part of being able to do what we did.
Jesse Wilson again.
I honestly think that's one of the best things about. I know there's people are always looking at the effectiveness of the DNI, but there's really no way to get everyone to connect unless you have policies and tools and those types of things across the board. The reciprocity directives that they've done, you have to provide your sourcing. Doesn't mean it necessarily always happens, but having that there, it gave us something we could point to. It said, no, this is official guidance. Very important.
Intellipedia is the top one that people kind of look at as responsible for flattening community. It's just transparent work, transparent review, more eyeballs on these problems, more expertise concentrated in a transparent way. So the Interlink revolution was a very, software-y way, and, as some have described it, to share information in a new way.
Don Burke again.
I refuse to use the word regret in life. You do the best you can, and as long as you're trying, you can't regret. So I would say the biggest letdown was that we didn't make nearly as much progress in the transformation as we had hoped. But those were big. That was a BHAG, to be sure. BHAG. Big, hairy, audacious goal. The likelihood that we were ever going to get there was small, but that was the big audacious goal that we wanted, was to really transform and rethink how you do analysis. Move to a living analytic world where nothing is ever really done. You just have the most up-to-date insights at any given time. That was obviously a bridge too far.
Now we hear again from Michael Wertheimer.
Really thrilled. I don't know that it wouldn't have succeeded without a DNI. Can't say. My sense is that of a lot of the initiatives we did, remember this is a long time ago, it's 20 years ago. You would think after 20 years a new high-level watermark would be, the chat would be pretty consistent. And it didn't. A lot of things didn't take. Didn't take as becoming normal. I think the guys wanted Intellipedia to be the source of reporting. And that customers would pull. What's the latest on problem ABC? I open up my Intellipedia portal and I pull the data I want. I don't think that ever happened. It was a vision.
I'm proud that I said yes to Intellipedia. Immediately, I said yes. I don't even think of a moment of hesitation other than that stupid rule we have to work around. I'm very proud of the blogging that I did. I do think I set an example that at least some people paid attention to.
You have been listening to the podcast series From Tragedy to Transformation, Intelligence Reform After 9/11, sponsored by the Unredacted Podcast. The interviews you heard were conducted by me, Brian Drake. We would like to thank our many contributors to this series: Don Burke, Sean Dennehy, Margaret Dillard, Tom Fingar, Jeff Fowler, Nicole Gibson, Richard Immerman, John Keith, Mark Lowenthal, Rebecca McGregor, Joan McIntyre, Carmen Medina, Louis Shepard, Teresa Smetzer, Mike Wertheimer, Sean Woltman, and Jesse Wilson. From Tragedy to Transformation was produced by Lindy Kaiser and Brian Drake, with support from Sean Dennehy, Jim Clapper, and Chris Rasmussen. If you have any questions or comments about this series, please reach out to us at questions@unredactedpodcast.com. And thank you.